up, my crime mob family? I'm back, y'all, like I never left, and you already know what time it is. We about to jump right into another true crime story. Y'all gotta excuse the thunder. It's raining outside today, but look, we're not gonna let a little bit of rain stop us. So y'all, today's story really had me, okay? Today's story threw me for a loop. Now, this is a story about lust, betrayal, deceit, and it just goes to show you that people are not always who they appear to be, okay? Everybody has two sides to them. This case right here is the perfect example of that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, David and Christy Evans met in high school in Roland, Oklahoma. And in February of 1991, the two actually started dating. Now, just 4 months after they started dating, they actually got married, okay? And then they ended up having 3 children. They had 1 daughter and 2 sons. So they were, by all appearances and by all accounts, just a typical suburban, all-American family. Now, David Evans actually went from being a very non-religious person to actually working at a religious bookstore. And he eventually became the pastor of Harmony Free Will Baptist Church. Now, from outside appearances, David Evans, aka Pastor Evans, was a very magnetic and very charming person. He was very out friendly and outgoing. He was liked by a lot of people, and he was just, overall, he seemed to be a really good person. David did a lot of work in the community to actually help and support his community. He did a lot of work with immigrants and, different things of that nature. So again, he appeared to be just a typical all-American guy. He appeared to be a good guy. And this family, the Evans family, they appear to be just your typical middle-class, all-American family. However, David and Christy's daughter, Brittany, would actually go on to later make statements about her father. And not only did she make some statements about her dad, David, but his 2 sons also made statements. And they basically said that while on the outside, David was a very, again, religious, upstanding citizen. He was a pastor. He seemed to be very outgoing, very friendly. Behind the curtain, so to speak, there was a whole nother side of David that the rest of the world and the rest of the community did not know about. Now, in particular, David and Christy's children actually described one incident where David made the children stay up all night cleaning, okay? And when the children were finally finished cleaning, David gets up and he knocks everything back over again, and then the kids have to clean it all up again, okay? And while they're cleaning it up for a second time, David is yelling insults at the children. So Brittany and her brothers, they described their father, Pastor David, as being very controlling, very abusive, emotionally abusive, as well as physically abusive towards his own children and towards his wife. Brittany also recalled another time where she was in high school and her mom were actually riding together. They stopped at a local fast food restaurant, and on the way home after eating, they actually had to throw away all of the wrappers and any evidence of the food because David was very, very controlling over the money, and he was very, very controlling over how much his wife and his children could and could not spend. And it was to the point where they were not allowed to even buy anything, okay, unless they had his approval. Now, on April 4th of 2010, this family situation kind of reached a climax, so to speak, and everything kind of just exploded. Now, what ended up happening is that David allegedly physically abused his kids. His kids went to school and they told about the abuse, and the children were actually temporarily removed from their home, and they were actually placed with their mother Christy's parents. So the children were essentially placed with their grandparents for some time because of David's alleged abuse and his abusive behavior. Now, again, to the outside world, they seem to be the perfect family. Okay, this was a dad who was well liked by many in the community. This was a man who appeared to care deeply about his community. And this was a man who was a pastor. 3 children, 3 beautiful children, and a wife. So they appeared to be just your typical all-American family. But behind closed doors, we never really know what's going on in a household. Now, not only did David and Christy and the Evans appear to be the perfect family in real life, but also on social media. When you look through David's Facebook page and his wife's Facebook page, they appear to be happily married. And as a matter of fact, on March 15th, David actually made a very loving post, and he dedicated that to his wife. By looking at their social media pages, you wouldn't see any kinds of signs of trouble within that marriage. It looked like the perfect marriage. But we all know that no marriage is perfect, no relationship is perfect, and no family is perfect. And as a matter of fact, in this case, I would say the perfect storm was silently brewing. And this is what no one knew. Now, apparently, sort of like the tipping scale and all of this started in 2017, okay? Investigators would uncover a series of Facebook messages between David and his wife, Christy, where David was basically complaining about their sex life. And he was basically telling his wife, Christy, that, hey, you know, you're not exciting enough in the bedroom. We need to try new things, and you need to be more open in the bedroom. Now, it got to the point where David started actually asking / demanding that his wife Christy allow him to basically do a threesome, okay? And he wanted to have a threesome with another man and with his wife, and he wanted it to be a situation where this other man would be able to call his wife names and, you know, different things like that. And he was really pressuring and pressing his wife to do these things. At some point, David even started taking his wife to sex clubs and sex parties. And so there was a lot going on in this marriage. Of course, Christy was allegedly very uncomfortable with this. She was never, you know, comfortable when she was at these sexcapade parties and, you know, orgy parties with her husband. Now, from there, David actually started creating ads on Craigslist where he was, you know, looking for sex. And so this was something that went on for a while, okay, at least a couple of months, where David was constantly pressuring his wife to be more exciting in the bedroom. And he was sort of like, you know, pulling her into this world of threesomes and this world of orgies and, you know, all of these other things that she was allegedly uncomfortable with. Now, allegedly in February, David sent text messages to his children where he basically told them that his wife was divorcing him. Now, this whole thing basically started in March, okay, after Pastor David returned from a mission trip to Mexico. He actually had spent some time in Mexico where he was, you know, giving back, and he actually made some Facebook posts about that, and I'm going to show those posts somewhere on the screen. You'll see them pop up. And it was when David returned home from this mission trip that this whole case really started. Now, this all started in the early morning hours of March 22nd. 911 would receive a frantic call from the Evans household. And I'm going to play a clip of that 911 call now.
What's up, my husband? He's ready to pull the blood, and I heard a loud pop. He's bleeding out his nose and mouth, and it's all over the bed.
Do you see a gun anywhere around him?
No, I don't see anything.
Now, as soon as police and paramedics responded to the scene, this was obvious, okay? It was very obvious that this was not an accident. This was a homicide. David Evans was dead. He was shot dead in his bed while he was sleeping. Now, the story that Christy Evans gave initially was that someone had broken into the home, some intruder, and she was asleep with her husband in the bed, and she awoke to a loud popping sound. Now, just a few days after David was murdered, the police actually received a text message from Brittany, David and Christy's daughter, and basically that text message said that, hey, my mom Christy is going to come in today and she is going to give a statement. And so later on that day, as promised, Christy Evans came down to the police station and she did give a statement, but she actually gave a lot more than a statement. She actually, at that time, she confessed, okay, to the murder of her pastor husband, David. Now, Christy told the investigators that her husband was very abusive, he was very controlling, and he was not very nice to her. That he called her a lot of names like fat and, other derogatory names that I'm not going to repeat here on this channel. Now, apparently, this murder, and the events leading up to this murder actually started a few months ago. So a few months before the actual murder. And it happened at a Super 8 motel. Now, Christy and her husband David were at a Super 8 motel when they met 26-year-old Khalil Square. Now, apparently, allegedly, these three had a threesome. David, his wife Christy, and this gentleman by the name of Khalil, these three, they had a threesome. And allegedly, this was not a one-time thing, This became like a regular thing for the three of them. Now, unbeknownst to David, when he went on his mission trip to Mexico, what he did not know is that secretly behind his back, his wife Christy and this gentleman Khalil, they were actually hooking up on the side, to have an affair, which David, of course, had no knowledge of this. Now, Christy would later say in her confession that when David went to Mexico, Square, the young man Khalil Square, actually stayed over at the house while David was in Mexico. Now, while Khalil was at the home with Christy, when David was again in Mexico, Christy started to tell Khalil a lot of stories and a lot of things about David and all of the abuse that she has had to suffer throughout the years, all of the derogatory names that David would call her. And she really let it be known to Khalil that, she was not happy in this marriage. She wanted some kind of freedom and she needed an escape. Now, while David was, away in Mexico, he was posting very regularly on his Facebook page, and he even posted a picture of himself. Christy commented on it, and she basically said something to the effect of, "That's my husband." And then, David replied to her with the little heart eye emojis. So again, to everyone looking from the outside, it appeared that this was the perfect marriage, but unbeknownst to everyone else, including David, while he was in Mexico, this young man, Khalil, was at his home. And not only was he at the home, but Khalil and Christy had actually started to plan David's murder. Now, Christy gives her husband David's gun, to Khalil. And not only does she give him David's gun, but she also gave him a box of bullets. Now, from there, Christy and Khalil, they set up a time that Khalil would come back to the Evans home to kill David. Now, that night, Christy left the back door open, so that Khalil could later come in and kill David. Now, according to Christy, Khalil arrived at the home sometime around 1 o'clock in the morning. And she says that when she heard him come into the house, she goes into the living room. I guess she was looking for him. And at that point, she saw Khalil crouched down behind a sofa. Now, apparently, Khalil was nervous. And at one point, he told Christy, "Hey, I think I'm being too loud. And I think I'm making too much noise." And Christy basically, said, "No, you're fine. We're just going to go ahead with this plan." So she really wanted her husband dead. Even when it seemed like Khalil may have been having second thoughts about this. Now, as Khalil made his way into the bedroom, Christy turned her back and she sat there listening. Okay, and a few minutes later is when she heard a gunshot. Now, after Khalil shot David, Khalil allegedly, according to Christy, Khalil runs out of the house through the back door, and at that point, Christy comes into the bedroom where her husband is. She sits next to him, she picks up the phone, and she calls 911, and she plays the grieving wife. Now, what Christy did not know is that even before she came in and made this confession to the police, they had already became very suspicious of her. Now, apparently, after David was killed, a neighbor came forward to police and said, hey, when David was out of town in Mexico, I saw this white Ford Mustang parked in the driveway of their house, and this car was there for 3 days. And then the neighbor goes on to say that the morning that David was killed, I saw this same white Ford Mustang parked in the driveway. And not only that, but the neighbor actually brought forth evidence. He brought forth he apparently had a security system, and so he brought that surveillance to the police. And so the police had a very good idea that there was more to this story than Christy was telling. And they were just in the process of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together when Christy actually came in on her own accord and made this confession. Now, Christy did eventually plead guilty to the murder of her husband. Okay. And I've done some research. I've done a lot of research. I do know, again, that she pled guilty. I do not know and was unable to find any information about her sentencing. So I don't know if she's already been sentenced and how much time she received if she was sentenced. And I also do not know if Khalil Square has been sentenced. But what we do know is that Christy is in jail right now, and Khalil is also in jail right now. This case was just shocking to me, and I think it shocked a lot of people in the community. It certainly shocked the members of, Harmony Church, where David was a pastor, because no one had any idea about this double life. None of us know each other like we think we do. You can live with a person and really not know them, and this is a classic case of that. This is a couple that was married for years. I don't think David ever knew that his wife would take it this far. But it went this far, and it's just a really sad situation. I will be back next week with another true crime story. So make sure that you stay tuned. Make sure you hit that notification button so that every time I upload, you can get notified, and let's really try to show one another love. Let's try to uplift and support each other as much as we can. But until next time, it's been real, and I'll see y'all later.